Hey, what's going on? All right, so I wanted to talk today about something that I've been rolling around my head a lot lately, which is essentially like, what is the purpose of our websites now? Like, what's the purpose of your website? You know, like, how do we actually interact with them? Like, how are people actually interacting with our websites? And what purpose do they serve within that customer organization engagement? You know, like, why do people come to our websites? What are they expecting to see when they get on our websites? And then how can we then take that information and leverage that so that way we don't just design our websites better, but we're crafting the videos that we're using on our websites more effectively? And it kind of just begs the question, should our videos even be on our websites? I can't remember why I started thinking about this, but I mean, I'm always wanting to make sure that what I'm ultimately crafting, what I'm ultimately providing is providing significant value to the organization that I'm serving, right? I don't want to just like make a video because I think it's a creative pursuit and it was something fun to do. To me, that's a waste of money. That's a poor investment. I'm not serving my clients well if I'm not also helping them think through, like, if they're getting, I'm not serving my clients well if I'm not making sure that they're getting the most value out of their investment with these videos. Like, are they literally doing what we're designing them to do? And in order for them to do what we're designing them to do, they have to be seen, right? And at the beginning of the sort of DSLR revolution, of the cinematic video marketing, of this sort of cinematic brand storytelling, right? When we were actually starting to make brand films, that industry basically started at the beginning of the DSLR revolution. And so if you can remember back, that was around kind of the time between 2008, 2011, when that was really starting to take off and solidify. So this industry has basically been about over 10 years now, right? It's 2021 now. But throughout that 10 years, how we have engaged and how we exist, in a sense, on the internet has shifted, right? So I feel like the biggest shift has been from congregating on websites to now congregating on social platforms, right? So websites themselves used to be the place where you would congregate because, they would have really informative blogs, or they would be a forum. They would actually create a forum, and people would go to the website so they could get on that forum to exchange ideas and exchange information. And I feel like that was like a big driver of community earlier on, right? And that was when blogging was really exploding and really taking off. And so your website was basically like your business, right? Your website was your business. Now it's just kind of taken for granted that, yes, you need a web presence, you need to build a website, but do we interact with websites the same way that we used to? And so I'm starting to understand that, like, I don't actually think we do, right? I don't think people engage on websites like we used to engage. I don't think we just hang out on websites, right? Like, I think we're hanging out on platforms, and so I feel like the forum, and we can just take the forum as a case study. The forum has moved from the website to the platform. So the forum has basically been taken over by Facebook groups, right? Like, people now are engaging on Facebook groups and using Facebook groups in a very similar way that they've been using forums. And I can only just guess that this would just continue to move in that direction, and that Facebook would probably just start designing their groups like forums, where you can actually have kind of like how Reddit is structured. You would just have like subjects and headings or whatever. That would make sense because the groups themselves are already topical, but it might make sense to then have like areas of topic to then investigate within a group itself. And a lot of this has been driven by my most recent experience with the Zcam Facebook group, because the Zcam Facebook group operates like a forum, and they expect people, when they show up to that Facebook group, to treat it as if they are showing up to a forum. Their expectation, like the members in that group, their expectation is that the same decorum, the same sort of like social norms that you would expect inside of a forum, like don't ask questions that have already been asked, research to find the answer first, like don't keep having the same conversations over and over, so that way you can make sure to really address immediate concerns and then continue to do more exploration and more research, right? Like those same rules and expectations are present in the Facebook group. And so they run that Facebook group like a forum, and I'm starting to realize like, yeah, I haven't really gone to a website to engage on their forum. Like who sets up a forum on a website nowadays, right? It's very rare. It used to be like extremely commonplace, almost like an expectation. If you're trying to build a community on your website, start a forum so you can build that community and the community will then take care of itself. And that is now part of the platform and part of how we're engaging in platforms. And so I was just kind of struck because I was thinking about this and trying to think through, when do I actually go to websites? Like the companies that I really like, the companies that I love, the companies that I'm a fan of, how often am I on their website? And what is my expectation when I'm actually getting to their website? And what I realized is it's like extremely minimal. I rarely go to these companies' websites. And when I do go to the website, it's to get something. I'm approaching the website with an expectation. It's almost like this hunter-gatherer mindset. I'm going there so that way I can grab something from them, whether that be and most often it is something digital that I can download. That's what I'm looking for when I'm going to these websites. So just for example, I'm a camera dude, so I need to update the firmware of my cameras from time to time, or download LUT packs, so like things that can help translate the footage into something that is viewable and visible. It doesn't just look muddy and gray, right? Like that's what I'm looking for. And I have to go to their websites to get the specific download links to get what I'm looking for. But that's what I'm on the website to do. I'm on the website to get something, to obtain something. I'm not there just to hang out. I'm not there to figure out what is this company up to. That's not why I'm going to the website. Like if I'm going to a website, say for a restaurant, right? Like I'm trying to figure out what's their menu, right? Like what's on the menu, and then what hours are they open? And this engagement happens when it is a new restaurant, or I have to remind myself if that restaurant is going to be open today, right? And oftentimes that's just like a Google search to see if they've updated anything on their Google tab, and then I'm going to the website to make sure that we can get the phone number, so then we can call them, right? So it's almost like the website is just becoming like this random, kind of like a trampoline, like a lily pad that I'm jumping to jump off of, I'm not jumping to it to hang out there. I'm not jumping to it so I can spend time and explore and investigate what's going on. Now, this is going to be different so that was basically for how I treat restaurants, right? Like I'm going to get specific information. This is different if I'm trying to like evaluate a specific organization. So like if it's a business services, right? Like if it's something where it's like an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, right? Like someone in that industry where I really want to make sure that like, are they going to take care of me well? Like, am I in good hands here? Can I trust these people? Like, do they offer what I'm looking for? I'm going to explore more on their website at that point because I'm trying to, I'm in decision-making mode at that point. I'm trying to make the decision. But once I'm done through that moment of decision-making, I don't go back to the website, right? And then it becomes the same way that I would use a restaurant, right? I'm gonna go back to that website to find the hours. And if we go back to talking about the restaurant again, the only time I'm really gonna go to the website is to check the menu. And then after that, I don't go to the website again. Now, websites that I will most engage with, however, are going to be set up as an e-commerce system, right? So if there's a specific portal that I'm logging into, so that way I can then purchase something, that's in a sense when I'm actually going to be on a website for an extended period of time. But keep in mind, I'm still going there to get something. I'm in shop mode, right? Like I'm trying to get stuff. I'm trying to obtain something, and that's what I'm on there to do. I'm going to a site to consume, to get. And so I started understanding it's like, man, the only time I'm actually going on a website is either to get something after the fact, but the time that I'm spending the most amount of time on that website is when I'm in the buying process, right? So ultimately, a website is primarily a sales tool, and that's all it is. All it is just a massive sales tool, and its function should ultimately be to enable the sale, to get the customer excited and give them the information that they need in order to make those next steps to do business with your organization or to support your organization or to, that's basically it. Either do business or support it, right? Like, or get engaged or get involved, right? Unless if they're trying to volunteer or sign up for something, right? But that's it. The website itself facilitates that decision-making process, okay? No one's going there to hang out, right? And if they are hanging out, then there's some sort of portal component, there's some sort of blog component, there's some sort of e-commerce component to your site, and that the moment they get on their homepage, they're not spending time on the homepage looking around anymore. They're on the homepage to go directly to where they're trying to go. And so that really, in a way, that changes how we start thinking about how we're using our brand films and what type of brand films are you going to put on the website. And then if you're making brand films, like what should it be doing? What information should it be communicating? And then where do you put your brand films if you're making brand films? So this is something that I'm trying to roll around and trying to think through of like making sure that you're properly and we're appropriately mapping out that customer journey. So that way we can provide that predictive service at scale, right? Which is marketing, like making sure that you can provide what the customer is expecting to see at the moment that they're expecting to see it. That's what great marketing is. And designing that message so it's the appropriate message designed for the appropriate person. That's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. So ultimately what this lets us know is that your social platforms are vastly more important for cultivating that relationship with your target audience and with your target consumers than your website. Your website is still significantly important, but the part it plays in that overall customer journey is a much smaller span of time than the entire time that you're actually serving and building and cultivating that relationship. Because what is going to get them to that website, right? Like you're gonna have to try to meet them where they're at, which most likely they're on a specific social platform, right? Like that's where people are hanging out. So we need to make sure that like we're providing content that's going to entice them to get to the website. If there's something specific that you want them to see on your website, right? So you got to entice them to get to the website so they notice you, so that way they can then do that decision-making process. But then once they've had that touch point, and you've either built the relationship or haven't built the relationship, it's unlikely that they're going to return unless you're trying to give them something. Unless you have something on the website that they need, then they're going to return back and get that from you, whether that be information or some sort of thing that they're going to download or something that they're going to sign up for or register for. This lets me know that our platforms, our social platforms, are significantly more important, and our newsletters are significantly important. It also helps us to understand that the videos that are on your website, they need to be designed to specifically address those immediate concerns of your customer, that the first things that they're coming into contact with need to basically get to the point and help them get to the point, or help to really communicate what you're all about just quickly. But if there's specific brand films that you want to create to try to cultivate that brand story, if we're hiding them on the web page, right? If we're like burying that in the About Us section, if we're not creating some sort of draw and some sort of funnel in a sense to bring those eyes on that video, it's unlikely that that video is going to get the attention that you want it to receive. I mean, ultimately, if we're making a brand film, the people who are really going to watch that's kind of like a mid-funnel content piece or a re-engagement content piece, right? The people who are going to see that are people who are actually interested in your organization. It's unlikely that you're going to get new eyes on a brand film that they're going to actually commit to watching that, right? Like people are often concerned about attention span, but I mean, for goodness sakes, I'll listen to an entire 9-hour-long audiobook, right? Like I'll listen to hour-long podcast episodes. People who also tend to complain about attention spans will then be like, yeah, we got to make short videos. But people who watch short videos are going to be watching them on TikTok, and you're probably going to waste like an hour on end on TikTok watching short video after short video after short video after short video. Is that a short attention span, right? When you actually like look at it from the outside perspective, what we realize is it's not attention spans that are the problem. The problem is making content that is actually engaging and worth someone's time. And so because of that, when someone has started to build that relationship and developed an affinity for your organization, what you're putting out is now worth their time because now you're important to them. I mean, if you've treated them well, if they enjoy your product, they're then going to want to learn more about your organization. That's just how relationships work, right? Marketing is just a reflection of human relationship building. How we build and form relationships with each other and with people is essentially the same process of how we build relationships with organizations. It's just when we're implementing marketing tactics into the mix, we're doing that relationship building at scale, right? And so the people that we're really building relationships with when we're making brand films are those people that already have an affinity for your organization, right? Like it's just what we're doing then is we're solidifying that relationship. We're making that relationship stronger. We're building that affinity that they have for our organization, so that way they tell their friends about our organization, right? So essentially what we're doing with brand storytelling and how brand storytelling adds value to your organization over time is that it's not necessarily for a new person. It can work with new people, definitely, if you've got something that is engaging and it just happens to be something that they're kind of on the, like I was about to say on the fence about, but it's almost like it's some sort of fringe thing that hits them that they might be interested in, then they might give some time to it. But primarily we're going after already a core audience with the goal of making them super fans, right? Of really engaging them into our story. And then what we're doing is we're providing them the language to then tell other people about our organization. That's what effective brand storytelling does. Really what we're leaning on is what Malcolm Gladwell identified in his book, The Tipping Point. So if you haven't read The Tipping Point, it's a fantastic book. I'll leave a link to it in the description, so just jump over to that, get it. It's awesome. But essentially what Malcolm Gladwell is doing in The Tipping Point is he's studying movements and he's studying the stickiness of ideas and how ideas can sort of move, how they spark and they create trends within society, right, over time. And he identifies a couple people, and it's very similar to the adoption curve, right? That was really well laid out in Crossing the Chasm, which is also a great book. I forget the author off the top of my head, but I'll also leave a link to that book as well, because I love both of those books are really, really great and kind of foundational for thinking about brand building and marketing. But what Malcolm Gladwell is ultimately talking about is he identifies these people that he calls the connectors, right? And he talks about the connectors of being these sort of like in-between people that are able to pull relationships together, pull ideas and connect people with ideas, connect people to people, that these are the people that really cause the success of movements and the success of engagements. And so very similarly to sort of the adoption curve and the sort of demographics, psychographics that you're working through in your sort of adoption curve, you've got the innovators, right? And so these are your hyper nerds. These are the people that are really, really focused in on a specific niche. Let's take Marvel for an example, because I feel like they've actually mastered this. So like your hyper nerds are your comic book geeks, right? So these are the people who like live and breathe everything comic books. And so they're gonna, they may even be cosplayers. They're just like constantly invested in the world. They know, they've read all the comics. They know all the subplots. They know all the character arcs. They know like, they have favorite writers, they have favorite illustrators, right? Like these people are always at the Comic-Con stuff. So those are your like super geeks, right? And the thing is like super geeks don't necessarily mean, don't necessarily make movements, right? Because they're so invested in their niche that all they know is that niche. And all their friends are just invested in that niche. And it's almost like, in a sense, they're so absorbed in it that it's difficult for them to even like break out of that and kind of like make relationships outside of that niche, because they're so embedded in it. Their identity is completely within that world. But then outside of that is you have these sort of early adopters, right? And the early adopters are the people who are also geeky, right? But they look at the super geeks to help inform them about trends, right? But then these people are sort of like the influencers among society. These are what Malcolm Gladwell calls the connectors. They're able to then determine if this is a trend and if this is something that is cool and hip, and then they tell that to other people. And they're really the people that then catapult that. They're kind of like able to translate the geekiness into common language, right? So they're sort of like judging what's cool, what's not cool, and they're going to try out, they're going to take that initial risk of looking silly by trying out things, but They're always chasing something new and chasing something novel. They don't necessarily get stuck in a specific trend. They're looking for trends, and they're chasing this sort of dream, right? And then they're the people that influence the rest of the population, and they're the people that actually help the rest of the population know what's cool and what's not cool, what's in and what's trending and what's not trending. And so the reason why I bring up Marvel is because I believe that when you're making a video, if we're taking into account the fact that we've got short attention spans, right? I hate saying we have short attention spans. We don't have short attention spans. We have a very low tolerance for crap content that we're not interested in because there's too many choices. But I'm just gonna keep saying short attention spans because that's what people understand. So if it's true that we've got short attention spans, right? Then when we're making and when we're crafting our videos, a video is really only going to be effective if we're designing it for a specific audience, right? At a specific moment in time with the message that they need to hear. This is contrary to how I feel like we actually start behaving when we're crafting a video, because then we start actually getting scared, and it's like, oh, but we're paying so much for this video, well, let's make it say everything. But common sense and our own experience tells us that we don't like messages that are trying to be for everyone. We tune it out because we know that they're disingenuous. We know that they're not talking to us, right? That it's not specifically for me. And because it's not for me and it's so general and it's so bland that I'm like, oh, this is trying to get my attention. This isn't actually anything that's really worth my time. And so because of that, I bounce and I don't even listen to it, right? Like, you know this, right? Like, you're looking and you're hoping for something to catch your attention, to resonate with you, because you're looking at so much stuff all the time. We only want to hone in on things that are actually worth our time, that are actually worth the investment of our time and attention. And those messages and that content is going to be the stuff that's made for me, right? For me, at this very moment, that's what I'm gonna hone into. I mean, think about it. You've got entire algorithms designed to do just that. Like YouTube, once you jump on YouTube, YouTube is designed to curate videos to predict what it thinks you're gonna be interested at this moment. And dag blasted, they're way too good at it. I didn't know I was going to be interested in Scarlett Johansson leaning on Chris Hemsworth in an interview. Don't know why I wasted 10 seconds of my life actually watching that video clip, right? But it's like, oh, yeah, I'm actually interested in that. I want to see that. And she just leans, and I don't know why I watched it, right? But it's like, when we're thinking about like, how do we capture someone's attention? It's like, who knows, you know? Because it's like, well, let's see, are they interested in that? The reason they recommended that is because I'm constantly watching like scenes from Marvel movies, and I'm watching like previews and trailers of the Marvel shows that are gonna come out, right? Because I'm actually interested in that. And because of that, it just goes one to one. So if we look back at Marvel and what they've done with creating their universe, is I believe they've done it so brilliantly in the fact that they were just like bold enough to make a film franchise designed for the comic book nerds, right? Like, and I'm saying this, and I'm not meaning to demean people who are really into comic books. This is just to help to identify that specific subgroup, okay? So not meaning to insult anybody, my apologies ahead of time. But they've designed the entire cinematic universe for the comic book nerd. You can tell that they're using just obscure characters, right? They're not using the go-to characters that the general population expects to see and knows so well. No. They're digging into obscure storylines. They're the Guardians of the daggum galaxy, okay? There's just a great example right there. Like, who even knew about the Guardians of the Galaxy until they had their own film? You wanna know who knew? The comic book nerds knew, right? Like, these are the people who are so excited about the Marvel Cinematic Universe because, and this is the genius of Marvel, is they're basically designing they're banking $1 billion film, what do we call those things? Oh my God, universe, cinematic universe. They're banking a multi-billion dollar cinematic universe on a specific subset group. And it has paid off just in full for them, right? Like it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe is literally dictating the American culture at this moment in time. It is seriously becoming the new Star Wars, right? Like I feel like it's going to have a ripple effect that's going to resonate within the American society and maybe even global society for decades to come, where it's very fascinating. And how they design that is they're designing it for the comic book nerd, right? Like they're using obscure storylines, they're using obscure characters. And I believe the reason for this is because these people, you can guarantee that because their life is the comics, that these people live and breathe it, which means they're going to create content about it. That they're going to take that story that they're being given by Marvel, and they're now going to take full ownership of that and start adding to it and start guessing. And these are the guys that are like trying to find photos of the sets and trying to see like what this means and what storylines this might mean about the comics. This is why Marvel can't. This is why Marvel computer animates all of the suits now, because they're trying to not reveal their secrets to these people, and these people love that even more because now they're trying to. It's a mystery that they're trying to solve. It's a game that they're playing, so they're like fully in it. But because they're fully in it, they're now world building. They're now taking this story and they're breathing life into it. They're making like 20-minute YouTube videos on predictions about what this next series is going to be, of what the plot of this next thing is going to be. And that just starts to build and build. And that creates a trickle-out effect, right? That production, right, of them taking hold of that story and running with it creates a trickle-out effect of interest. And it builds this massive momentum that goes beyond what the marketing department of Marvel themselves can actually manage, right? Like, and really when you actually start like getting invested in it, it's like the fact that these stories it's like the fact that they are building this content based on these stories means that you're going to get unique and meaningful content that Marvel themselves just can't make, that their marketing department just can't even touch. Because they can't reproduce that fiery enthusiasm. They can only stoke it. They can only fuel it and continue to make sure that it breathes and that it lives. It's that enthusiasm that's creating that momentum, that's creating that content, that starts to spill out, that then gets the attention of the influencers. And at that moment, then they start realizing, wait, this is actually pretty cool. This is worth watching. And then they turned around, they told other people, and other people came in, right? Now, if we kind of like look at how it started, it didn't necessarily start that way. It started with Iron Man, right? And they made a sort of like mass appeal blockbuster with the hope of building this complex universe over time. But as they've built that complex universe over time, and as they've matured that universe over time, they've doubled down on the nerds, right? They've realized that the momentum is going to be built by them, and that's what's going to keep this cinematic universe going. And so, in essence, that entire saga that's now becoming television shows is designed for those people. But it has this trickle-out effect that is now gaining more and more popularity, because I'm a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't buy any comics, right? Like I don't read any of the comics. I had no idea who any of these characters were before they started coming to the screen, right? But I'm a huge fan of the films because they're fun, right? They're fun, and now I'm invested in this universe. Like I've watched all the films, I'm watching all the shows, like I think it's cool because I respect the marketing genius behind having all these films and telling this epic story across all of these different films, across all these different characters, and now across television. That is super intriguing to me. So just from a marketing perspective, I appreciate and respect that, and I'm picking up on that. So does that make sense? So let's just look at that as a case study. The intent and the design is for a specific person, with a specific message, to give them a specific sense of value, but to invite them into this story so that way they will then take ownership over that story and run with it and build upon it, right? So they feel like they're a part of your story world. But although you're designing that for a specific person, there's going to be a ripple effect that will inevitably happen, right? Where other people outside of that initial subgroup, like myself, will still find certain aspects that relate to them interesting, right? So because I'm a marketer, I respect the marketing genius behind the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then since I'm a huge storytelling nerd and storytelling fan, the fact that it's this massive story that I can now get invested in and be a part of, I also love that. But I'm coming at it from a secondary point. So even though they doubled down and they put the investment in this subgroup, that is now paid off, and they're also reaching more audiences outside. It's just, in a sense, to a lesser and lesser degree, but even though it's to a lesser and lesser degree, over time, you're then drawing those people closer and closer and closer, right? Does that make sense? Because even though I would consider myself initially a fringe fan, now as I'm getting closer and closer and closer, I wouldn't put it past myself to start buying merchandise, to then make my identity and show myself as, yes, I'm a fan of Captain America. Yeah, I'm a fan of the Winter Soldier, right? Like, I'm gonna start putting on stuff that displays this, right? Like, I'll get those little toys. I'll put those toys on my desk. Like, does that make sense? They then start picking up that story, and the ripple effect, even the people caught in the ripple effect, will inevitably be drawn more fully into it as you continue to add value into the story. But how you're doing that and how you're adding value into the story is you've got to make sure that that specific subset group knows where to look, that you're targeting them specifically and you're giving them that story. And so they're not going to get that story if it's buried on your website unless they know how to get it. So when you're thinking about like brand storytelling and building your story over time, don't just think about it as let's just make a single video and let's put that video on the website, because you're risking that just getting lost and then wasting the investment that you made into that video. You got to think about your video almost like it's an event that you need to invite people to join you in, right? And so when we've seen the most success in the videos that we've released, it's when we've built that anticipation leading up to the premiere of the video, because the people who are already highly interested will want to watch the video about your organization because they are already interested in your organization. So don't put it past your current customer base that you've already cultivated a fandom there. There's people there that like your company, that like your organization, that, dare I say, love it, and they want to learn more about you. They want to be a part of that story because that helps to raise their appreciation of you. It's the same way as you're building a relationship. Like as you start to build a friendship with people, in order to deepen that friendship, you got to get personal with them. You got to get vulnerable with them. You have to tell them your life story. You have to tell them what you're struggling through. They have to get insight almost into your family dynamic. And as they gain insight into that, as you're becoming vulnerable, they're building an immense amount of trust with you, and that's solidifying and deepening that relationship. You already have the opportunity to do that right now with your core audience, right? And so it's just allowing yourself to be vulnerable and trust that they are there, and then start speaking to them and invite them to that deeper relationship with your organization, and then start to give them the story so they can carry that story. So it's just an example of, because let's just think about, if we're talking about, let's just talk about beer for a second. So if we're talking about beer, like if you're bringing, like over the holidays, my brother and my brother-in-law always bring obscure craft beer to the house at the holidays. And when they pass out, and it's this huge ritual that happens. It's awesome. It's fascinating. But they get the big bottles. So they're not coming with cans. They're coming with the bottled beer. It's at least a 16, 24-ounce bottle. And they grab 5 glasses. They open it up and they just pour a taste in each of the glasses, make sure everyone has it, and they pass out the glasses, and then they're telling us what the beer is, where the brewery is. They start talking about the ingredients that's in this, about the alcohol content, and they're telling us the story of the beer as then we're all sitting back and sipping this thing together, right? Because that's what connectors, that's what people who are introducing you to something new love to do. They don't just want to give you something new. They want to give you the information and the story as well, because that, in a selfish, prideful way, that makes them more important in that moment. That adds value to the entire engagement, because now we're not just being entertained by the beer, we're being entertained by the story, right? And as they're then telling us the story, our appreciation for this drink is growing, right? Like, and then your appreciation for the moment is growing. And then they get the feeling that they just created that, right? That's what your customer base wants to do. They want to have those moments where they're introducing someone to something that they love, but then they have a story to tell them about this thing, because it just allows them to perform in that moment. It makes that moment more special. It makes the thing that they're giving more special, because now it's raising the perceived value, not just of the thing, but of the entire engagement. It's deepening their relationship with the person they're introducing to this thing, because now the affection of that person is going to be greater for the person who made the introduction, right? So what we're doing with brand storytelling is we're facilitating engagements like that. We have to lean in on our super fans and double down on them and give them the content that they need and the story that they can tell, kind of like set them up with this foundation so they can go and tell other people and introduce other people to us, right? And the way that we make sure that they do that is designing these important pieces of content like an event. Design an event around it, build anticipation over time, get them excited, kind of trickle out content like a weeks ahead of time that you're releasing this brand story, that you're releasing this film, and just schedule it as a premiere, because I bet you they're going to show up. And if you have a physical location, you may even want to think about throwing a bit of a party or something for it to make sure that you're creating engagement. Don't just hide treasure and bury it under the ground, right? Like, make sure that you put that treasure on display and you create an environment that builds interest, that builds anticipation, that really gets people excited. Because what we've noticed in our own videos when we've premiered them ourselves, after people watch these films, they want to do something. That's like the critical moment. Like, we design our films so that way they want to do something after they watch it. So you're basically compounding that energy with anticipation. And so really at the end, they really want to do something. So you have to make sure that you give them something to do. And very often it's make that video available immediately right after the premiere, because then they're gonna start sharing it. They're gonna start throwing it around to their friends because, man, this video is awesome. Guys, you've got to see this. This was so cool. I love this company. I love this organization. I'm so stoked that I am a part of their story. So that's what you're creating. And so this is sort of a bit of a meander thing, but it's like, don't just hide something on the website. Think more clearly about why people are going to that website, what their initial expectation is when they're going to the website, because my feeling is that a website is just that brief moment in time of being a sales tool. People are going there with this hunter-gatherer mentality, and therefore where they're hanging out is on your platforms. Where you're building that relationship is on your platforms. So double down on your super fans. Make your brand storytelling content for them. So that way you're giving them value so they can share with their friends, because it makes them, in an essence, more valuable to their friends, and it helps them deepen their relationships with their friends. And then that starts to create new relationships for your organization. So it's this kind of like pay it forward type of thing, of like investing in the people who are already investing in you. All right, hope this was thought-provoking. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll hope to get to them. Also, you can find me at McNabb_storytelling on Instagram. Feel free to send me a DM there. Would love to talk brand storytelling or documentary filmmaking, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.